Good morning, everybody. Very pleased to have all of you here with the third webinar for Complete College Georgia. I want to welcome all of you. We have a very full agenda today, and so pleased that Columbus State and Georgia Tech are prepared to share their work, and we're going to start with them and have questions after their two presentations. We also want to have time for questions that you've posted, and we will, of course, as we have in the prior webinars, have time for questions as we move along. So please, as always, post your questions, and we'll make sure and get those addressed. I'm Lynn Weisenbach here in the system office, and would like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. It's Linda Noble.
This is Susan Campbell-Lounsbury.
Art Seavey.
Chris Furlan.
And so with that, Art, do you want to take over here?
Sure. We greatly appreciate Columbus and Georgia Tech for helping us out on this. And with that, I'll just turn it over to the Columbus team. And you'll see they have some slides, and Georgia Tech has some slides. We'll go from there.
Me?
Yes.
Hello. I think I'd like to first introduce the people on our team that are around the table. I'm Dr. Darrell Holloman. I'm Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs.
I'm Tina Butcher. I'm the Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education.
I'm Shri Sitaraman, Director of Institutional Research.
And Gina Sheets, the Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. And Tom Hackett, our Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, will be here in just a moment.
To start out, I think what we found was very important for us as we moved forward with discussions about Complete Georgia College was our first bullet here of how and to what extent we would involve our campus constituencies. We're also in the process of developing our new strategic plan. Dr. Sheets and Dr. Hackett have taken on that initiative, and so it really aligns with Complete Georgia College, and so we began to have very open and thoughtful discussions with faculty members, which is very important because the academic side of the house will carry a great weight of how we sustain Complete Georgia College. But we also involved our students at both the undergraduate and graduate level, as well as our staff. And the staff component was important because many times staff are overlooked as they facilitate these kind of campus discussions. And so those initiatives were highly important. One thing that we did was to take it an extra step and also work on involving our trustees to pull in our external constituencies to see how this fits with our college within the region. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Butcher.
Dr. Sitaraman is going to talk a little bit about our College and Career Readiness Initiative.
As part of our strategic plan, we have collected data on the job projections for 2008 to 2018 at the national, state, and local level. And we have to now sift through the data by the job proficiency level, by what is required, whether it's an associate's degree or undergraduate degree or master's degree. And Dr. Butcher is going to talk about our early college initiative for college readiness.
We have been involved in the Early College Initiative. The first group came to our campus in 2008. And so we are able to work with those students to prepare them for full-time college. And so we are beginning I believe our 5th cohort this coming year. And so those students have really helped us a lot in understanding what the students need in order to be prepared for college. We've learned a lot of lessons in working with those students. And so I believe that they will be a big help in informing us about the needs of other students that are coming, particularly first generation college students. And additionally, we have just about the same time that we started working with the Complete College Initiative, we were also preparing a Title III grant for geared toward the needs of high-need students. And it's a federal grant that is for students who are financially in need. And so that has also helped us gain a lot of background information about students in these populations. So we found that a lot of the students that were first generation also fell into the financially at-risk category, and so we're able to work with these students to help provide some good support services for them. The next bullet about transforming remediation, although this is not specifically in the learning support vein, but on our campus we had never activated the midterm grade reporting process in Banner. And so that's one of the initiatives that we have just gone ahead and began working with. We've activated it and put it into play this summer for the first time, with the thought that when students see what their progress is at the midpoint of the term, that will encourage some of them to seek assistance that they might not otherwise have sought before. And additionally, along those same veins, always since I've been here, we've had an early alert system that was campus developed, and it's an electronic early alert system. And I think that's a part where we will continue to do work in this area for supporting students who need additional academic assistance, is helping faculty understand how important their role is in helping students to know what assistance to seek and where they can get it on our campus. And so I believe that those two things, although they may be a part of the regular education curriculum and not necessarily learning support or developmental studies, I think those will go a long way toward helping our students. And then finally, my final piece in this is in shortening time to degree. And we have worked and just recently re-signed some articulation agreements with Columbus Technical College. That one was in nursing, and it was for their RN students to come over to our BSN program. So we've got that RN to BSN seamless agreement. And then several programs that we have articulated with West Georgia Technical College. So we have revised those, signed them. We're currently working on additional agreements, revising agreements that we have with Andrew College and Georgia Military College. And because of our proximity to Fort Benning, we're developing a new agreement with Central Texas College so that those students who complete their core work there can transfer seamlessly into our BBA and General Business program. So those are some of the things that we've worked on for shortening time to degree. Dr. Holloman's going to talk a little bit about what we've done thus far in restructuring delivery.
When we returned to our campus from the summit and we started to pull these different constituencies around the table, one of the things that we found was really looking at how we are offering our courses. We have some very unique populations on the Columbus State campus. For example, we have a significant military presence on our campus. We're so close to Fort Benning. We also have a very high first-generation college student. I think it's about 33%. Dr. Shri just let me know that this morning because we're working on another initiative. And so what we needed to do was really begin a discussion on how we could be very flexible and fluid with our course delivery for individuals that can't just stay in a regular classroom setting. And so we started to really talk about how we would provide different levels of online course delivery. So we began to talk about which courses could be blended, which courses could be in a hybrid model, and which could be totally online, or more importantly, which programs could be completely online. For example, with our military population, due to their deployment, maybe coming here for 2 years and leaving, we needed to provide an option where complete programs were online. And so we have really pulled together our academic deans to be able to really talk about how we're going to facilitate that process. Now, having taught a very horrible course last semester myself online, I'm not an online professor, in the summer, one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that when we have these courses moved to an online format, that we're using what we call Quality Matters rubrics to make sure that our online or hybrid courses are still having great academic rigor, that they're sustainable, that they have broad-based appeal, and that they are meeting the needs of the population for which those courses were delivered. Those things are extremely important because when you go online, you have to make sure that all of the courses are still having a great contribution to the academic mission. And so when these courses pass the Quality Matters rubric, then we have faculty able to apply for course development grants to really make sure that they're enhancing the technological activity on our campus.
Okay. We are building a data warehouse and dashboard with Oracle, and we have already loaded the data from Dana into the data warehouse, and we have set up some dashboards for retention, progression, and graduation. And to comply with the Complete College America metrics, we have included data by first-time, full-time freshmen, and part-time freshmen, full-time transfers and part-time transfers, and all the other metrics like race, gender, ethnicity, and age. And these are right now in the data validation stage. And once we complete that, this dashboard will go live by end of next month. And then at the next stage, we'll probably add the financial aid data into the data warehouse so we can get the metrics by Pell status or first-generation student status and all other metrics. And that concludes, I think, or Dr. Hackett can continue.
A couple things. This is Tom. I'm provost at Columbus State. I just wanted to talk a little bit about involving different constituencies on campus to make this happen, and some of my colleagues may have alluded to this a little bit, but the way we tried to kick this off, when we came up to the summit, we realized that we needed to move very expeditiously into making sure faculty were involved in the design of this. In other words, we had a summit team that sort of teed it up with some talking points, but we wanted to make sure we brought that back and we're very open with faculty where we were. So our faculty center under Iris Saltiel led that process, and we had a very candid, open discussion, and then our document that we submitted to state resulted from that. The only other point I would make is in order to make this happen on this campus, we really made a just very aggressive effort to break down the barriers and walls between the different divisions. One of the problems with making something like this happen with as many innovative practices is that you need everyone involved all the way from the recruiting operation and enrollment services all the way through advising and on into the individual departments. Now, to say we're where we need to be would be not entirely accurate, but boy, we've made light years, I think, of movement in this area. So those would be some of the things that from a leadership standpoint, they're just it's absolutely essential, especially that student affairs and academic affairs work really closely together as a team. And that concludes our presentation.
That's great. Thank you, Columbus. So now if you have any questions, type them in the box or unmute your mic. Thank you again, and I think this emphasizes that really it takes involving everybody on campus, and that Complete College Georgia is very comprehensive, like you saw on the summit, but that these are the steps that really campuses should be taking to get more specific and actually turn from those one-page summaries into doing all these various projects. So if you have a question, please type it in the box or just unmute your mic, ask it, and then mute your mic again.
Art, there was a question about the name of the grant that they were referring to from Fort Valley.
Are you referring to the Title III grant? It was a federal Title III grant, Strengthening Institutions Program.
All right, so if there's no other questions right now, we're going to move on, but you'll have a chance after the next presentation too. Linda?
I just wanted to make a comment, and then I'll turn it over to Lynn. We've just had Dr. Davis step in. We'd like him to say hello to everybody. But the comment I wanted to make was one of the things that I got excited about listening to Columbus State's presentation was this whole alignment with their strategic plan. As you know, we really believe this is more than an initiative. It's something that you've got to integrate into your everyday operations. So seeing that alignment makes an awful lot of sense in terms of sustainability.
Well, hello, this is Houston Davis, and I'll just be very brief.
I have a question from Georgia Community College. We are not using the enrollment management suite and banner. We are just doing it in-house.
Could you repeat that one more time? Sorry, we missed that.
We are not using the enrollment management suite in banner. We are just developing those metrics in-house.
All right, so that's an in-house product. Thank you. All right, and back to Dr. Davis.
This is Houston Davis. I was just saying hello to everyone. I appreciate all the efforts that are going in this. Dr. Noble just mentioned strategic plan. One of the things that I can share with the group, we've had some good conversations with the Chancellor and others about this work of Complete College Georgia really being central to the development of the system strategic plan and perhaps even the development of a public agenda that very much reflects the completion agenda as a central component, if not the leading component. So very excited about the work that's going on and very much appreciate all of the effort that all of you are putting forward. So thank you very much and look forward to getting to know and working with all of you.
All right, great. So we asked Columbus to talk about involving everybody on campus, and the next presentation from Georgia Tech really gets into how could you use data and data specific to your campus, or which other types of data should you be looking to get, and how do you incorporate that into your analysis? So with that, Georgia Tech, if you're ready.
Good morning. This is Georgia Tech. This is Stephen Gerardo. I'm the director of our Center for Academic Success here at Georgia Tech. It's a unit within our Office of Undergraduate Education, and I'm joined by several members of our planning team who I'll just quickly say their names and areas. Sandy Bramlett's the Executive Director of Institutional Research and Planning. Beth Spencer is our Senior Assistant Director here in the Center for Academic Success. Dean John Stein is our Dean of Students and Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. Dr. Paul Cohn is our Vice Provost for Enrollment Services. Corey Dunn is with Institutional Research and Planning, and Dustin Shiflett is with OIT. Some of our members, we have a much bigger team than this, that some of whom were not able to join us this morning. Today, as Art alluded to, a lot of our talk is going to be about how we have been using data consistently to improve our retention and graduation rates at Georgia Tech. So the first slide, or the first part of our talk, will be a little bit of an overview of where we've come at Georgia Tech over the last 10 or so years in retention and graduation rates to get to where we are today. Then the second piece will talk about specifically what are the metrics that we look at here at Georgia Tech. Both have been consistently tracking already, many of which are already part of the USG and the CCA metrics, but some additional variables that we look at here at Tech. And then the third piece will be how we're using those metrics to inform the development of our Complete College Georgia plan. So just to give you a little bit of a historical perspective, I think many of us in the system know that Georgia Tech is well known for its academic rigor. Students and families coming here expect it to be hard, and it is hard. If you look at in the past 10 years, though, our culture here was one that students got out, and that was something that our most recent past president, Dr. Clough, really wanted to change when he started his administration. We were looking at 85% first-year retention rates and 66% graduation rates. Today, through Dr. Clough's leadership and through the continued leadership of Dr. Peterson, we're looking at a much different picture with a first-year retention rate of 95% and a 79% graduation rate. I jumped ahead a little bit there, but it was really in the late 90s that we started to see a shift in culture and tide. The last bullet there just gives an idea of the absolute number of degrees we're producing, and since degree attainment is really the core of the Complete College Georgia plans, we have produced in the last 11, 12 years over 32,000 bachelor's degrees, and of course no surprise that 3/4 of those are in STEM disciplines, which is really Georgia Tech's focus. The next two graphs just give you, again, sort of a pictorial descriptive of the last 15 or so years in our graduation rates. And you can see in the early 90s, we were looking again at a 66% graduation rate to today looking at a 79%. So we're very pleased with the results, but it's been a long-term effort to get the picture changed here. The next slide then is first-year retention rate. This is first-time, full-time freshmen. Early 90s started out at 85% first-year retention rate. To today, we hit our high of 95% with the fall 2010 cohort, and we're obviously very pleased to see that. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy Bramblett now to talk a little bit about metrics and what we track and what we study.
Thanks, Stephen. At Georgia Tech, we love our data, and it is pretty obvious in the student studies that we conduct, and it's kind of, we have a saying in institutional research, if it moves, we study it. If it doesn't move, we're still going to study it. And we annually produce reports on freshman retention and graduation, as well as transfer student retention and graduation. It's something with our population of students, which we'll see a little bit later on. We have a lot of transfer students who come to us, particularly from the university system of Georgia schools, and we study their success as well as those who are normally studied by IPEDS and the federal government as well. We also make great use of our survey data that we have, the freshman survey that's conducted by UCLA through the Higher Education Research Institute, the Cooperative Institutional Research Program, and we tie that data to the National Survey of Student Engagement so we can see progress, we hope, from the time they start with us as freshmen until the time that they graduate as seniors. We also do special studies, and sometimes these come out of the most unusual places, but other times, you know, it's something that we put an initiative in place and then we study it and we assess it to make sure it's doing what we'd like for it to do. And there are some examples there of some of the things that we've looked at. One of the things we'd like to reinvigorate is our survey of non-returning students, to find out, for those who could have succeeded at Georgia Tech, why did you choose to leave? Was there something that we could have done differently? Was there something that we could have maybe intervened more with that we didn't catch on quite at that point? Also, too, we've changed some of our policies around. We now issue midterm grades to, let students know where they stand in their lower division classes, the 1,000 and 2,000 level classes. And we also take a look at, we have later drop dates now. We're now in the mid-semester point where students can drop a grade or drop a class without receiving a penalty towards their overall GPA. So we study what the effect is on those later drop dates. The study of non-graduating seniors, we were perplexed. A few years ago, we were asked by one of our administrators here at Georgia Tech, how many of our students make it to, at that time he said 110 hours and don't graduate. And it was beyond our comprehension that you could get to 90 hours at Georgia Tech or 110 hours at Georgia Tech and not walk out of here with a degree. But then we found that we actually had a significant portion of students who, if they had stayed around, would have had a great impact on our graduation rate. So we started to look at the non-graduating seniors as well. So who are the Georgia Tech students? Last fall, we had 13,300 degree-seeking undergraduates. That's 95% of our undergraduate population were here to get degrees. They came to us as freshmen, they come to us as transfer students, and you can kind of see the breakdown there of the classification. 12% of our students are underrepresented minorities. We have adult learners age 25 and over who are 4% of the population. A little over 20% are Pell recipients. Students with disabilities account for 4%. We don't have a whole lot who require learning support when they come to Georgia Tech, so we're not really commenting on that there. But when you look at how we've laid out who our students are, this sort of makes sense for what you're going to see in our plan later on when we talk about the populations that we're going to study further as a result of the Complete College Georgia initiative. So what do we know from our data? We know that girls rock at Georgia Tech. Women are retained at higher rates than the men are. Asian students tend to do better. Georgia residents, which should make a lot of people happy, are retained at higher rates here too. We have this fabulous freshman seminar at Georgia Tech that has a tremendous effect on our first-time freshmen, and we have tied the successful completion of the freshman seminar to success at Georgia Tech. That seminar, when we combine it with the freshman experience, which is run by our housing department, those two things combined together, they lead to a significant increase in retention and ultimately graduation rates. We're also looking at the sophomore slump. We tend to lose students. We lose the most between the first and second years, but we also lose another number that we'd like to address between the second and third year, again, that sophomore slump. And no great surprise when you look at what we know from retention, how we graduate students. But we do also want to comment, we have a highly successful co-op program, which is the largest voluntary co-op program in the country. Those students who participate in the co-op program graduate anywhere from 8% to 17% higher graduation rates. I mean, we're talking into the 90 percentile when we're looking at six-year graduation rates if they participate in that program. So that's another one of our metrics that we do follow. So we know that students stay, and we also probably need to understand why they leave, because when we understand why they're leaving, that's where we see the greatest potential for our intervention programs to be instigated. Usually 2 to 3% of our freshmen leave because they don't meet that minimum GPA of 1.70. And then usually by that sixth year, when we're looking at the six-year graduation rate, we've lost about 12% because the grades just couldn't quite cut it. When they do leave, they wanted to change their major to something that Georgia Tech didn't offer. We have a lot of folks who want to go into education. They want to be teachers, communications, political science, sports management, nursing. These are the types of things that our students, while they may think they want to come here to be an engineer or a computer scientist or an architect, when they get here, they decide, you know what, that's not really for me. That kind of feeds into the Georgia Tech was just not a good fit as well. Financial hardships, particularly for our out-of-state students who are paying a much higher rate than our in-state students are for tuition and fees. Sometimes there's homesickness involved here, that the family is just too far away and they want to be a little bit closer to home. And finally, just the pressure. It tends to be, because there are high-performing students here, that peer pressure tends to be very high for our students. When we're looking at why students leave, we have found a tremendous amount of data to be very helpful in what we do with the National Student Clearinghouse. That is a treasure trove of information for you if you want to find out what happened to your students when they left. So looking at we had about 2,400 students in our 2005 entering freshman cohort. About 18% of them were not retained. So we'd like to find out, we're digging a little bit deeper into what happened to that 18%. And as you can see in that other spot, the other pie chart there, the tan-colored one, that, you know, a good many of them, 42% of them, could have stayed and been successful at Georgia Tech had they wanted to be here. So what we were able to find using the clearinghouse data is that the degrees were attained by 157 of the 436 who left. They actually went on and were successful at another institution. 134 of the 157 got bachelor's degrees. There were associate degrees awarded as well, and then 3 received unspecified degrees. So these students are capable of being successful, and we see that through the clearinghouse data. So when you look at the 134 bachelor's degrees that were received, what we were surprised to find is that 101 could have gotten that same degree here at Georgia Tech, whether it was in business or engineering or computer science, mathematics. These tend to be the majors that other students go into, and that we also offer here at Georgia Tech. So there's something else in play there with these students, whether they're from out of state going back home, or there's some other issue that they're dealing with for why they chose not to stay at Georgia Tech. And also, too, we did discover that if we had kept those 101 students who received bachelor's degrees and could have used that same discipline here at Georgia Tech, we would have had a graduation rate of about 85% had we retained those students. So this is something, again, that we are studying very closely here to find out what could we do for those students who could have succeeded at Georgia Tech to bring them back into the fold and perhaps increase that graduation rate and degree output.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how these data have informed the development of our plan. And like Columbus mentioned, I think two things. One, we also have a very comprehensive team that crosses many different disciplines at Georgia Tech: student affairs, academic affairs, enrollment services, faculty, really looking at these issues and studying them. The second thing is we have tied that into our plan, into our strategic plan as well. We have a 25-year strategic plan that was implemented under the leadership of our president, and within that plan, teams are really working right now on how to revitalize undergraduate education. So the initiatives that we're working on through that planning are really going to inform what we do with retention and graduation rates. And so it's, again, creating a sustainable implementation plan, building on things we're already doing. So I've couched these in the three areas that were requested in the plan template, and the first is improved access and completion. We offer, in terms of access, one of the areas that we offer is access for low-income students through our Tech Promise Scholarship. That's for Georgia students that meet a certain threshold of the poverty level, that picks up additional financial support beyond what the HOPE or other scholarship programs cover. Our president has pledged to support Governor Deal's REACH scholarship. That will kick in, of course, later on once the students in middle school reach the appropriate entry point, but we are committed to matching that program. We have an office that's devoted to supporting underrepresented students, and that's our Office of Minority Education, or OMED, and so we'll be highlighting initiatives that they're working on, particularly related to underrepresented students. Veterans, first-generation and students with disabilities, we don't currently have good data on, particularly on veterans and first generation, and that's something we're going to start tracking. We certainly have a population of students with disabilities, and we'll be looking at what types of programs or interventions we may need to provide support there. I think a big part of our plan will also involve what we just looked at, is why students leave Georgia Tech, whether that's not being retained in the sophomore year, after the sophomore year, or leaving Georgia Tech after 90 credit hours. And the question there is, are there at-risk intervention procedures that we can be implementing better at Tech? We do have a midterm progress report, an early alert type system, but what are the interventions that need to be in place there? Likewise, off course for degree completion. So I think in the retention literature, there's a lot of discussion about seniors really being a target that you want to reach out to. They can make the most immediate impact on your degree attainment. So looking at again, that 90-plus student population and why are they leaving, and if there's things we could do to retain them, is an area we want to examine. And then our Division of Student Affairs has already been engaged in conducting an analysis of retention in their areas and what programs are leading to increased retention. For example, tracking students that are involved in clubs and organizations. We have a sophomore programs initiative in Student Affairs that's going to really target programming for second-year students to hit that second-year retention rate. So we'll be looking, though, across the board at our Student Affairs programs and how that can connect to increasing retention and graduation rates. The second is instructional delivery. We're very proud and privileged to have opened our new Learning Commons this past fall, the Clough Undergraduate Learning Center. We have combined in this building all of our academic support services, so my office, which does tutoring and academic support programs, our advising office, we have a new communication center, our faculty development center. All of these are now contained in this building, and it's really targeted for undergraduates in the first 2 years. So after the first year has really been off the ground, getting things running, we're really going to examine how does this impact teaching and learning and ultimately student success. Another area that we're having some very, very preliminary conversations about is is really, are there places we could offer some online courses for our students? For example, students that might be interning or co-oping out of state or abroad, potentially they could be taking some courses that would decrease the time to degree completion. The last area that we'll include in our plan that was requested is really what we're doing in the K-12 arena, and Georgia Tech does a lot of partnering with K-12, and particularly within STEM. One of the programs, though, that I think we'll highlight in our plan is our Tech to Teaching program, and that's kind of an umbrella series of programs. But the bottom line there is we create pathways for Georgia Tech students that are interested in K-12 teaching as a career. We don't offer an education degree at Georgia Tech, and we don't offer teaching certification at Georgia Tech. But what we do is we partner with places like Kennesaw and Georgia State to offer programs that students can complete a rigorous degree at Georgia Tech and then go on and do an MAT or teacher certification credentials at one of the teacher preparation programs in the state, with the hope and the goal that these students will stay and teach in the state of Georgia, and particularly in high needs fields like STEM fields. So that's a program that I think we'll highlight, again, because it hits sort of two areas. One is helping our students get degrees that have in careers that we may not offer degrees in at Tech, but also a benefit to the system and the state. And that concludes our talk. We're happy to take any questions about our content.
Thank you very, very much. I just want to make a couple of comments on both of these that I think speak to everybody. What you heard here was obviously a lot of good work and a lot of thoughtful work and engagement across campuses and in some cases across the broader community, but also the highlighting of good work going on and making clear what they're learning and what else needs to be done. So in your plans, being explicit about both long-term goals and looking at low-hanging fruit. So really appreciated, for example, in Tech's case, saying, here's where we don't, there are certain areas we don't know what we need to know, and we need to learn more about particular populations, and we're aware of that and need to find out more. So that will be really helpful in your plan. So in your planning, please don't hesitate at all to say, here's a gap, and we know we need to get at that. So those are not negatives at all. Those are positives. Clarity about what you're working on, as well as the things that you're shining the light on positive things that are already going on. Both of those are good. Do we have questions about either of these really outstanding presentations? And again, a big thanks to both Columbus State and Georgia Tech for sharing and for the good work going on at both places.
Georgia Tech, can you see the questions in the box, or would you like us to read them?
No, we can see it. The major factors that were responsible for Georgia Tech's improvement in graduation rates, that's a great question, and we ponder that. But what I'll say, I'm going to say a couple of things here about what we viewed as the reasons for the improvement. First of all, you'll note that the first year we attained 90% was coincidentally when we switched to semesters. And there was a theory at that time that, okay, instead of 3 quarters and out, now they have to take 3 semesters and then they'll leave. But that really didn't bear out, because as you can see, we've been able to consistently maintain those graduation rates after 1999, the retention rates at 90% or above. I tie it to a couple of different things. First of all, I mentioned the GT1000 and freshman experience programs. We have a high percentage of participation in both of those programs, and I really do think that those contribute to student success, because it draws the students in, it gives them the tools that they need to succeed. It gives them some touch points that they have that helps their career throughout Georgia Tech. And through the 4 to 6 years that they're here. Also, I think that we've provided a lot of co-curricular opportunities, things like the co-op program, undergraduate research opportunities. One of the things with the undergraduate research opportunities, students don't realize, I think, a lot of times that they're coming to a research institution, and why do they keep talking about research, research, research? Well, undergraduate research opportunities lets that come alive and lets the students understand that this is very important to what we do here at Georgia Tech, and it has an effect not just on how you learn, but also something for the greater good in terms of outcomes from that research. And I also think, too, that the study abroad programs that we encourage, and while we could probably have a good discussion about whether or not this increases our time to degree, we also find great value in providing these experiences for students so they can have it. Again, it ties them to Georgia Tech, and we think it makes for a better environment for them so they don't want to leave. We also have other interventions in place, too, that are great, more developed than they were previously, things like tutoring and counseling, academic advising. Our Office of Minority Education Development, they provide a great service to our students in terms of providing tutors and challenge programs and study halls and that type of thing as well. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces around what the major factors are. Those are the things that we can kind of point to and say that, yeah, this probably had something to do with it.
This is Stephen, and I'll build off Sandy's question for a minute and answer the second one. But I think, you know, in the early 90s, putting a lot of resources towards the first year at Georgia Tech was partly a critical reason of improving graduation rates long term. And I think when you look at retention literature, and I know a lot of us in the system, because I see a lot of you at the conferences, have first-year experience programs, but I think it's very important to look at your data, your program-level data, in addition to your institutional-level data that we've been talking about, because that's where you can really drill down which programs are effective and which ones may need to be retooled or reconsidered. Now, as I alluded to with the second-year programming area, is something that we need to look at even more now at Georgia Tech, and that's not limited to Tech. That's certainly a national trend that schools are looking at, is making sure that once you retain them in the first year, that we don't lose them after the second year. And so that's why we'll look a little bit more deeply at our sophomore year. The question about the advising, I should clarify. So we do not have centralized advising at Georgia Tech. The advising is all handled within the departments. We have some pre-professional advising in the areas of pre-teaching, pre-health, and pre-law, and we have an office that coordinates the advising campus-wide. But the departments do the advising, so we haven't moved all of the advising into the Clough Commons, but the coordination of that advising and the leadership for advising is housed in this building. And we do have some area that they can go and do some general quick advising. We have a core information desk in the Learning Center that students can stop in and ask general advising questions. The staff there are trained as general academic advisors. Not quite a one-stop shop model that some of you may be familiar with, but just really to problem solve some high-level questions.
All right, do we have any other questions? If not, I'd encourage you, thank you again to our presenters, but I encourage you all to continue the discussion on the Completion Lab. If you're interested, write a blog about a project or a problem you have, post in the discussion forums, promote what you're doing, ask where you might need some help. I think we all have something to learn from each other on this, and we want to see that continue. So if there's no more questions, we do want to get to what people submitted in the registration, and we'll go through those. And if you have other additional questions, type it in the box or let us know.
So, first question was, will there be any statewide assistance tracking students from K-12 into matriculation at a USG or TCSG school? And we can do that right now through the longitudinal data system. What we're not sure about is in terms of who asked the question, what kind of assistance in terms of reporting you're really wanting. Thought it would be helpful if Susan could share what we can do right now, but then if whoever asked this could type in little bit more about what you were thinking, as Susan articulates what we can do, we can probably give a slightly better answer as well. So, Susan?
Yeah, what we currently do, we, just so that you know, and many of you may already know this, but we regularly share data with the Department of Education, and so each year we obtain data files of the recent high school graduates. And in the past, what we have done is we have produced what we called the high school feedback reports, which were shared. Then, it was really kind of a service for the high schools in the state. Now we are working with the Department of Education, and we're providing them with the data, kind of in a pilot project, so that they will be producing those high school feedback reports in their own data system. But my point in saying this is that, we do have this relationship established with the Department of Education where we exchange data, and so if there is something in particular, if there's some kind of, if there's some information in particular that you're seeking, I would be glad to take that into consideration and develop something new that would be beneficial to all of our institutions.
Okay. So again, if there are things that that we can do to be helpful, please let us know, and we can make that happen, because we do have the data sets. So if there are reporting tools that would be helpful, we can do that.
So question number 2 was what types of data are being sought at the system level with regards to the section on quality in the appendix of the USG metrics, and are institutions encouraged to set quantitative goals for quality measures? So the quality issue was something the members of the metrics working group felt strongly about. And reading through it, no, we're not looking at specific quantitative measures to be reported at the system level. That this was a way to show that while we have degree production, access, all that at the system level, quality is still an important part to maintain and improve, but that's better done through existing mechanisms, accreditation, et cetera, faculty, and rather than something across the board at the system level. So we're not asking you to report on that. I think it's just a mention of saying here's how certain campuses might do it, might look at quality, and just to acknowledge that this is not about changing quality at all. It's about improving quality and earning high quality degrees. So however you handle that in your plan is fine, but this is not about reporting out at a system level any system-wide quality metrics. And the third question said, considering the fact that campus plans will guide a collaborative process that will be used to set campus targets, how specific should we get when we write our campus plan goals? And in this one, we've seen a few different approaches in the campus plan summaries. I would say at this point, even though we have the 250,000 number, we're not looking to say, okay, here's my specific share, or to extrapolate from that and set targets based on that. Really what we're looking for is more of this kind of reflective, introspective process like you saw with the Georgia Tech, of saying, who are my populations that are gaining access right now? What's my current graduation rate? And potentially where do we want to be? Where do we want to head? And then figuring out, okay, based on that new target, what's our degree production going to be? So this is more introspective of saying, where do we want to head as a campus, and to set targets based on that. So get as specific as you want for saying, okay, our graduation rate's here at 50%, maybe we want to move it up to 60%, and what does that look like long term? But really we're looking from you to say, given quality issues, given budget issues, what can we do, what do we want to do, what type of institution do we want to be, and more of that self-reflective process. Next question.
Yeah, we have, I'm not going to read these to you because there's two we got two coming in, both of which I think had to do with what kind of reporting mechanisms will we put in place, what will be the timeline. These would be the follow-up reports after you've submitted a campus plan, and then what opportunities will there be to, let your work inform and revise and update the plan that you originally submit to us this summer. So I think the best answer to that question is to let us put together a set of guidelines for how the follow-up reporting mechanism will take place, kind of what we'll expect with that, and the specific timelines about that, because there will be other timelines that inform that process. And then, of course, we anticipate these plans as living, breathing, working documents. So your work should, in fact, inform so that you can evaluate, revise, and update accordingly. So with that said, the main emphasis there is that what you submit initially, while we want it to be as thought out and well designed as possible, be clear that there will be opportunities to revise and to update periodically.
Okay, the next question was a hypothetical one about students who transfer to a university from a technical or two-year school, and the tracking shows that the population struggles with success. If we're forced to offer additional supplemental instruction, how do institutions report to show that they did not recruit the population but are trying to provide necessary interventions? And I would say that this really gets back to the data and data analysis and really looking at the data. So using data, using analytics, and reporting back, looking at what you're doing, how things are working, because I would hazard a guess that this is really any and all students and looking at all your students and how they're doing. So that gets back to data tracking.
And I would just add that I think, I agree with that completely, Lynn, and this is Susan, and what I would add is that this is where it becomes important to be looking at those transfer-in cohorts and the graduation rates of those transfer-in cohorts in comparison to the cohorts that began at your institution. So, I mean, this is it's just an additional, it's another report that we're going to be doing, and in some cases we've been doing them, but they just haven't received a lot of attention in the past, and now I think there is more attention being paid to these transfer-in students.
Okay, the next one, how often will we assess the success of Complete College Georgia? And this gets back really to Linda's comment and to Houston's comment. I think it's fair to say that this is going to be a major part of the ongoing strategic plan, and really it's the intent of the metrics overall. So we'll be doing data analysis at the system level, just as you're doing at the campus level, to analyze the success of the work. So this will be ongoing, both in terms of formative as you're doing and annual as you're doing. And so we're mirroring at the system level what you're doing at the campus level. Additionally, as you know, the Higher Ed Funding Commission is linking to this, so part of this question was, would an outside source be used to do assessing? I think that, it's safe to say that overall, as you all know nationally, what's going on at higher ed is being looked at broadly. And so just to take an example, within Georgia, the Higher Ed Funding Commission is looking at this. So how, and I don't know the answer to the question, excuse me, but I think it's safe to say that they'll probably be looking at the effect of changes there on completion as well. So this work is going to be looked at through a variety of lens, but certainly at the system level we're monitoring as we go, and certainly annually looking at data. Okay. Susan, do you want to?
The next question was, someone wrote that they'd still like to have an official definition for first generation, and I just wanted to update you. We are looking into that, and we will try to get that to you as quickly as possible. I will let you know that we're leaning toward what was actually, I think, a recommendation of the metrics working group, which was to adopt the questions that were on the FAFSA application, and to use that in developing a definition for first generation students. So that's definitely the way we are leaning. And then the rest of the question is for the financial aid implications for students transferring from technical and two-year schools when only the credits toward the degree count. And I don't know. I don't really know if we have anything more to say there at this time. I think it's yeah. I mean, I think this. I mean, we probably need to have. We probably need to flesh this concern out a bit more. So, I mean, I think the more details, at least from where I stand, I'll just speak for myself. The more details we have about the impact that this is making on students, I think the better, the better the understanding will be of the problem.
We have one last question that was submitted during the registration process for the webinar, and then we'll turn to the ones you're submitting now up on the screen. But there was a question about what's the status of the USG policy task force that we mentioned at the last webinar, and we are moving forward with that. We are doing a little bit of internal vetting here in terms of who should be on that task force, what the scope and charge of it should be. But we are hopeful to be able to launch that very soon.
Okay, and then Z's asking about the board staff responding to the one-page summaries that the campus has submitted. We have read them all, and basically we do not anticipate responding to each and every one, so sort of no news is good news. And we will respond to ones that need additional support and work by the end of next week. So, if you don't hear anything by the end of next week, you can assume that you're on track.
All right. The next question, and actually Dr. Davis just walked back in the room. I'm not sure you knew he was gone. I just told on him then. But the next question from East Georgia: will the current 6 USG strategic plan goals be revised in light of Complete College Georgia? So I'll let him speak to that.
Yes, I mentioned a little earlier that as we're developing the public agenda / strategic plan, one of the early conversations that I've had with Chancellor Huckabee is making certain that the Complete College Georgia framework is central to that. I mean, in some ways, it may become the engine that's pulling that train. We'll see, but you can bank on that the CCG goals, the CCG values, what Governor Deal and what our board have adopted in terms of that long-term plan, that is absolutely going to be replicated. And in some ways, that's good news to all of you because that means no wasted effort. And that's I'm very big on making certain that from an internal and external standpoint that we kill as many birds with one stone, if you will, as possible. And I was delighted to hear Chancellor Huckabee positively receiving the idea of making the CCG project central to that, because that can make certain to accelerate the work that we're doing.
So do we have any other questions?
All right. Well, we'll post the presentations on the Completion Lab, and also there's several discussion forums that could hit on different topics brought up by each team. So please continue the discussion. And if you, again, like to promote what you're doing or have other issues or questions that you'd like to ask of the group, just go ahead and post it. You don't have to go through us. That's the whole point of the website. Linda? And we do have one more webinar, same format with the registration. You'll receive an email about a week ahead of time. But look forward to that.
And I'll ask you all to think about, I know we've been kind of relying on these webinars to stay in touch and try and address your questions. We only have one more scheduled, I believe. I know we're launching into the summer, so your campuses change shape a little bit during that time. But be thinking about ways between now and 1st of July when those reports were due. Do we need additional webinars? What is there some other mechanism or anything we can put in place to continue to support you? We're happy to try and do that.
Again, thank all of you, and we look forward to the next webinar.